So this is a final assignment for knowledge management in the finals, and this is my PowerPoint that goes along with the paper that I wrote. It's about a case that I handled in 2015. I am currently employed with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. This is when I was at the Jurupa Valley Station. I was on the special enforcement team, and I was also on a burglary suppression team. And it was a case that I worked for months that included multi-agencies and several suspects as well. The agencies that were involved were Riverside County Sheriff's, Anaheim Police, Riverside Police Department, and then San Diego. And this was a case that was a ring of burglaries that consisted of several subjects involved. What they would do is go out at night and break in to Connex boxes that were parked or put on construction sites that stored all of their generators, tools, heavy equipment. And what they would do would they would go in, usually they would have a company truck parked there, and they learned that the keys would be left in the gas tank or on the tire. So they would back in, break the lock, steal the truck, and then cut the lock to the Connex box and then empty it out. When they were done, they would usually go to a car wash, wash off all the property, and then store it at either a storage location or somebody's house. And how I got all this information was I had a confidential informant that I arrested, and he told me everything that was going on. They worked all the way from San Diego their way north. They were caught in Elsinore, Corona, and then Riverside, also Ontario, Anaheim. And how I knew all this was because the agency would usually call me when they had my informant in custody, and he said that he was working for me and giving me information. The problem with this was that he couldn't stay out of custody, and he would use me as a crutch because once they learned that he was giving information, they would usually release him and not book him into jail. I spoke to the DA about signing him as a confidential informant, but he got rejected because of his cases that he was involved in. The other issue that I ran into was that the information that he gave me, or if they were going to go do a hit somewhere on a construction site, is that he was usually involved. So there was some issue there. My supervision, they were okay with me working with him as long as we didn't work any cases that he was involved with when he told me that the hits were going to be done. I had a supervisor at the time who we didn't really see eye to eye, and it was hard to tell him what I wanted and what my envision was for this case because it was a big case and it had a lot of moving parts, and I felt like he didn't really support some of the decisions that I wanted to do as far as putting trackers on cars, pole cams, everything that we had access to. We did a couple surveillance shifts at certain storage units that we knew that they were going into, but we never were able to catch them there. And so this took about months, and then San Diego finally was able to get to in custody. They were brothers, and they were able to pinpoint a few locations. The locations that I found were cleared to me so that if there was another agency looking at that house, basically they would call to see if there was another agency involved or dealing with a different case, and then that's how we all got in contact. The detective down in San Diego came up and met with me. We had a sit down. We went over who they had identified, who I had identified. We had a lot of common interests as far as people, and they were planning on writing warrants within the next 2 weeks. So that sped up a lot of stuff. And then I was able to get Anaheim, Riverside, I believe Ontario as well, and get a list of stuff. I had a huge folder that I also had information in of houses, who everybody was, how they were all connected as well. When dealing with this case, there was a few type of management issues and knowledge management that comes into play. Everybody comes from a different background, and I feel that when we had the meeting with all the different agencies, everybody brought their own knowledge and basically their experience when dealing with cases like this. And I believe that that was a big factor that came into play when we finally did serve all the warrants and stuff, because they were able to throw some ideas out there. We initially let San Diego take the lead because they wrote the warrants and we were there as backup. My supervisor let, I think, 4 of us go, and there was 4 warrants that were served simultaneously. I believe we got 4 in custody, and I think the main thing with this case was all the shared knowledge when it came to it, and everybody was on the same page and wanted the same goal. It's hard when you bring different agencies together that sometimes you might not get people that see eye to eye, but all these areas are being affected, and if we were able to take down this ring, there would be a huge decrease in crime in all the areas. Also, new laws that went into effect kind of put up a little bit of a speed bump for us, because we had to think of outside the box and find out priors and who was on probation or parole, supervised release. And so we were able to get probation involved as well, because at the Herpa station on our gang task force, we had one, and luckily he was willing to help out. Group identity, we came together and identified everybody, and then we just needed to be organized. I wish we had a little bit more time so that we could do a pin board with everybody involved, have a few more meetings, and have all the information locked in and solid, and more surveillance, but unfortunately in this situation it didn't. The people who were caught, they got a little bit of time, not as much as I wanted, but they all went to jail, and the most important thing is that the victims of this got back their property, because this was equipment that they needed to work to make money, and a lot of them took a heavy hit with their vehicles being stolen and the property. The information was that they would get it and they would either sell it, or they would put in orders what they need as far as generators, drills, lawnmowers, anything that you can think of that is work related. Basically what they would do is put an order into this ring, and they would go out and find the stuff they needed, and they would take it to Mexico and sell it, and then they would get a profit of it as well if they were able to get all the property that they needed. So I wish that I had some information prior to going into this case and this class, because I feel like it gave us a lot of outlines and information and different ways of bringing out the best knowledge that people have. There are a lot of good things that came out of this case, and there was also a lot of bad things that I think that I learned from and that I know now for future cases. So how did faith play a role in this whole case? There was a time where I almost gave up because it was quiet for a few weeks and we were dealing with other stuff. And just when I was about to give up on it, or I couldn't get in contact with people, or there was always a flyer that came out that they hit outside of our area, and then I would find my confidential informant, and I feel like I always kept faith that this case would come full circle, and that the victims who were affected would finally get their property back. And it took I want to say close to 6 to 7 months for this case, but it all worked out, and I truly believe that it was God blessing everyone for their hard work and determination and not giving up. So I feel that that's how faith played a role in his case.